Montana Territory. Late spring of 1879, thunder cracked over the Bitterroot Range as Fletcher Nolan rode hard through the pine-soaked hills, rain slicing across his face like glass. He had not meant to be out this far. Not at this hour. But he'd caught sight of smoke curling too thick from a chimney near the old mining pass. Folks out here either knew how to shelter their fires or they were in trouble. Fletcher didn't trust much, but he trusted signs. By the time he reached the cabin, his horse was lathered and his coat soaked to his bones. He slid down from the saddle, boots hitting wet earth, and knocked once before pushing the door open. The room was thick with heat and smoke. A woman stood near the hearth, sleeves rolled up, eyes wide with startle. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with soaked curls stuck to her cheeks and firelight painting her skin gold. Her dress was plain cotton, patched at the elbow, but she stood like she'd never needed silk to hold her dignity. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. "I am now," she said, coughing lightly, waving smoke toward the open window. "Damn chimney's clogged again. I was trying to clear it when the wind turned." He stepped in, tipping his hat back. "That's a dangerous thing on your own. I have done worse." She looked at him a moment too long, then said, "I'm Odessa Harlow. This is my land," he nodded. "Fletcher Nolan, I was passing through and saw the smoke." "Well, thank you, Mr. Nolan, but I've been managing fine." He looked around. A single room, a cot in the corner, a tin washtub, a ragged stuffed rabbit resting on a chair carved too small for an adult. "You live here alone?" he asked, her jaw tightened just slightly. "Me and my daughter, Calla, she's in the barn with the goats, afraid of thunder." He took a breath. "You got anyone helping you out here?" "No," Odessa said simply, then quieter, "not anymore." She turned from him and stirred the pot on the stove, but her hands shook. She steadied them. Fletcher stepped closer. "You need someone to fix that chimney. I can do that." She hesitated. "I do not have money to pay you." "I didn't ask for any," he said. Odessa studied him carefully, as if weighing something deep in her gut. Then she nodded. Fletcher spent the next hour up on the roof, working with stiff fingers in the rain while Odessa worked beside him, passing tools and holding the ladder steady. She was strong, uncomplaining, even when the wind chilled her through. When they climbed down, soaked and streaked with soot, Odessa laughed softly. "Look at us." Fletcher glanced over. Her laugh was light, genuine. Her cheeks were flushed, hair dripping curls down her neck. "Thank you," she said again. "That was kind," he nodded. "You're welcome." Just then, the barn door creaked open and a little girl ran toward them, bare feet kicking puddles. She was maybe 5, copper-haired with Odessa's eyes. "Mama," she cried. The skies loud again. Odessa bent down and scooped her into her arms. "It is just noise, sweet pea. Nothing to be scared of." The girl buried her face in Odessa's shoulder. Fletcher saw her small hands clutching tight. "This is Calla," Odessa said, looking at him. Fletcher gave a soft nod. "Hey there, Calla." The girl peeked up at him with cautious eyes. "Do you have a horse?" she asked. "I do." "Is it fast?" "Fast enough." Calla nodded, as though judging his worth on that alone. Then she leaned back into her mother. The rain kept falling steady. Odessa looked out over the yard, then back at Fletcher. "You should stay for supper, least I can do." He hesitated. But something in her eyes steadied him. "All right," he said. Inside, the cabin smelled of onions and cornbread by the time they were done eating. Calla had fallen asleep in the corner, curled against her rabbit. Odessa sat at the table across from him, a chipped mug in her hands. "You said you were just passing through," she said. "I was heading toward Hamilton. There's work there for a man who can ride and shoot straight." She looked down into her mug. "You married?" "No, why not?" He paused. "Never met the right one." Odessa looked up at him, expression unreadable. "You seem like someone who's had his share of trouble." "I have. So have I." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that does not press awkwardly but settles like a blanket. Rain tapped at the windows and the fire crackled low. Then Odessa stood suddenly and walked to the door, opening it. Rain poured down in silver sheets, thunder rolling far off. She stepped out into the yard. Fletcher rose. "Odessa?" She turned, barefoot in the mud, and smiled, not forced or polite, but something real. Then, without a word, she spun once, arms out, laughing as the rain soaked her clean. Fletcher stood in the doorway, watching her spin again, dress clinging to her legs, hair wild. She danced like someone who had been weighed down too long and was finally breathing again. He stepped into the rain slowly, boots sinking in the mud. She did not stop dancing. She looked at him, eyes shining. Something cracked open in him then, something quiet and certain. "I want to spend the rest of my life watching," he said. Odessa froze, breath catching. He stepped closer until the rain was falling around them both, and her laughter had gone still, replaced by something deeper in her eyes. "I mean it," he said. "I have never seen anything like you." She looked up at him. "And I have never heard anything like that." Calla stirred inside the cabin, but Odessa did not move. Rain slid down her face as she reached for his hand. "I do not know what this is," she said softly. "But I want to find out," Fletcher nodded. "We will." And in the rain, standing close, hearts open, they stayed, not as strangers anymore, but as something beginning. The next morning broke pale and quiet, sun creeping through the mist clinging to the trees. Fletcher had taken to the barn early, brushing down his horse and checking the latch on the side gate. The storm had passed, but the ground still held the weight of it, soft, sodden, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Odessa stood at the edge of the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her boots were still damp from the night before. She watched him work, noting the way he moved deliberate, like a man who'd learned not to waste strength. "You always up this early?" she called. He looked over his shoulder, giving a slow nod. "Old habit. Army drilled it into me." "Seems it stuck." She stepped down into the yard, careful to avoid the worst of the mud. "You served, 6th Cavalry. Texas and New Mexico mostly. Spent a year posted near Fort Bowie." Odessa glanced down, pulling her shawl tighter. "My brother was caught in Apache country. Never came back." He straightened, brushing grit from his hands. "I'm sorry, it happened more than it should have." She met his eyes. "I don't blame the people, just the war." He gave a quiet nod. "So do I." Calla came running from the henhouse, cheeks flushed from the morning air. She carried a single egg in her palm like something sacred. "Mama, this one's warm," she said, holding it up. Odessa crouched and kissed the top of her head. "That means the hen's doing her job." Fletcher reached for the saddlebag near the fence and pulled out a small leather-bound book. "This belonged to my sister. She kept sketches of places she wanted to see. I thought Calla might like it." Odessa stood slowly. "You had a sister, he said. "She passed 5 winters ago. Fever took her fast." Odessa stepped closer, eyes on the worn binding. "That's kind of you." Calla opened the book with careful fingers. Inside, pencil sketches lined the pages: a white cliff above a river, a grove of cottonwoods, a narrow canyon with water gleaming between the stone. "Did she draw these?" Odessa asked. Fletcher nodded. "Everyone." Calla turned another page. "Can I draw in it too?" "It's yours now," he said. "I think she'd want that." The girl smiled and ran toward the porch, clutching the book close. Odessa watched her go, then turned back. "You've got away with her." "I wasn't sure I would," he said. "Didn't grow up around many children, didn't know what to say." "You didn't say much," she said, "but you gave her something. That's more than most." A jay called sharply from the tree above, and Odessa looked up at the sound. "You planning to keep heading west?" "Was." "Now I'm not so sure." She crossed her arms. "I don't want to owe anyone, not even kindness." "I'm not here for debt," he said. "I'm here because I want to be." Odessa studied him, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Most men want something in return." "I want to feel the ground steady beneath me," he said, "and I want to look at you in the morning light." She blinked once, the words catching her off guard, then her voice dropped. "You speak like someone who's lost too much to waste time." "I have." She stepped in until she could hear the slow rhythm of his breath. "I don't know what to offer you," she said. "I'm not asking for anything but a place to stand," he said. "And maybe a reason to stay." Calla's voice rang out from the porch. "Mama, there's a deer in the field." Odessa turned to look. A young doe stood at the tree line, watching them, ears twitching. Sunlight caught the dew on the grass, turning the clearing silver. Fletcher looked at Odessa, then toward the house. "If you'll have me, I can help around here, chop wood, mend fences. You've got a lot to carry." She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "If you're staying, you sleep in the barn." "I figured," he said. "And if you leave," she added, "you don't do it without saying goodbye." "I won't." She nodded once, then turned back toward the house. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. "There's a broken hinge on the shed. If your hands are steady, it could be fixed before dusk." He gave a single nod, then picked up his tools without another word. By midday, the shed door swung even. Fletcher found himself repairing the fence beyond the goat pen while Odessa pulled weeds along the north edge of the garden. They worked without conversation, but not in silence. The kind of quiet that meant something was building between them, not rushed, not spoken, but real. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the ridgeline, Odessa brought out 2 tin cups and a bottle of blackberry wine she'd set down in the cellar last summer. They sat on overturned crates near the barn, watching the light fade. "I used to think I needed no one," she said. "And now, I still don't," she said, but her voice had softened. He looked at her, then lifted his cup in a quiet toast, to needing less and wanting more. She touched her tin to his. They didn't speak again, not until the stars had begun to show, and even then only with their eyes. The days settled into a rhythm that did not ask for permission. Time moved by the tilt of the sun and the call of the whippoorwills, and Fletcher stayed. He built a gate for the lower pasture and patched the leak along the roofline of the lean-to. Odessa didn't ask him to, but she watched from the garden rows, her hands deep in soil, her eyes marking more than she said. One evening, she brought out a pair of old work gloves and held them out. "These were my father's, I reckon they'll fit." Fletcher slid them on. "He teach you to keep land like this. He taught me not to wait on someone else to do it." He turned the glove over in his palm. "He's still living." "No," she said. "He passed before Calla was born." "He wouldn't have liked me staying out here alone, but he'd have understood it." Fletcher nodded once. "What about her father?" Odessa set the gloves back on the porch rail. "He left before I could tell him. I didn't go after him." "You ever wish you had?" "I used to," she said. "But now I don't waste myself on what-ifs." The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the field. Fletcher leaned against the porch post, arms crossed loosely. "I'd like to build a corral," he said. "You've got the space for more stock if you ever wanted." She tilted her head. "You planning on staying long enough to see that through?" "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't." Odessa looked toward the barn where Calla was brushing the goats, her back to them, humming under her breath. "She's never had a man around steady," she said. "You scare easy?" "No," he said. "But I don't take up space where I'm not wanted." Her gaze lingered on him for a beat. "Then you better build it strong. Winters here don't go easy." That night, after Calla was asleep, Odessa came out to the porch with a tin of lye soap and a worn cloth. Fletcher sat sharpening a blade against the whetstone, slow and even. "She's taken to you faster than I figured," she said. "I didn't expect that. You got a quiet way. She notices that. She doesn't trust loud." He looked up. "Neither do I." She dipped the cloth in the basin beside her and began scrubbing the tin until the remnants of the day gave way to clean metal. "She asked if you were staying forever," she said. "What you tell her?" I said I didn't know. Then I told her things change when folks are honest. "I don't plan to lie to you, Odessa." Her hands paused. "Then be honest now." He set the blade down. "I've had a life of moving, not much in the way of roots. But this feels like something I want to hold on to." She looked over, eyes steady. "I've built this with my hands. No one helped me carry it when it was heavy. I won't carry someone else." "I'd carry it with you," he said. The silence stretched, but it held no weight between them. Only the sound of the creek beyond the trees, moving like breath. "I don't know how to be soft with someone," she said. "You don't have to be soft," he replied. "Just real." The next morning, before light touched the ridge, Fletcher went into the woods west of the property line. When he returned, he carried 2 cedar saplings, roots swaddled in damp burlap. He planted them at a distance from the house where the soil was rich and the wind broke gentle. Odessa came up beside him, arms crossed. "Those for shade?" "No," he said. "They're for staying." She didn't answer at first. Then, "You plant trees when you think you'll be around to see them grow." He pressed soil around the base of the second sapling. "I want to watch them rise." She knelt beside him, brushing dirt from her fingers onto her skirt. "Then I reckon we better take care of them." When they stood, the sun had broken over the ridge, lighting the field in gold and pale green. Odessa didn't look away from the trees. "When I was younger," she said, "I thought love was something loud, like the stories, thunder and fire. But I think now it's something that just stays, even when it's quiet." Fletcher looked at her, the way her hand brushed the bark without thought, how the morning light caught the line of her jaw. I want to spend the rest of my life watching, he said. She turned to him then, and nothing in her face asked him to repeat it. It was not a question between them anymore. It was a vow. And when she reached for his hand, fingers twining with his, it felt like something that had already begun long before the rain. By mid-June, the earth had hardened under the sun's steady hand, and the scent of wild chamomile drifted from the hills. Fletcher worked long days fencing the west edge of the pasture, where the slope curved gentle toward the woods. Odessa stitched new curtains from the flour sacks she'd saved, and Calla followed her mother like a shadow, her feet bare and brown with dust. One afternoon, Odessa brought out a tin basin and placed it beneath the pump. She began to rinse the grit from a bundle of beet greens, sleeves rolled high, forearms spotted with sun. Fletcher leaned his shoulder against the porch beam, watching her hands move over the leaves. "You ever think of selling at the market in Corvallis?" he asked. She tipped her chin toward the basin. "I did once, but I couldn't leave Calla behind and the trip's a full day each way. I could ride it," he said. "Haul what you grow, you'd get fair coin for these." Odessa studied him, her expression unreadable. "You planning to take a cut?" "No. Just thinking it's time this place starts giving back to you." She looked down at the greens, then back at him. "I've never relied easy on others." "I'm not others," he said. That night, Odessa brought out her mother's ledger. The corners were worn soft, the ink faded in places. She opened it to a blank page and dipped the nib of her pen in the ink pot. "I haven't written down anything new in 2 years," she said. "Not since the spring I lost half the beans to frost and Calla broke her arm falling from the coop." Fletcher sat across from her, arms resting on the table. "That the year the barn roof caved," she glanced up. "How'd you know?" "The ridgepole's been replaced, newer cut than the rest." Odessa gave a small nod. "I did it myself. Took me 3 days." She wrote the date at the top of the page, and beneath it, in slow strokes, she began listing what they had. 12 hens, 4 goats, 1 milk cow, 2 cedar trees newly planted, and 1 man who'd stayed. Fletcher watched her hand move, steady now. "You're building something." "So are you," she said. Then, softer, "I didn't expect to build it with anyone." Calla stirred in her cot, her small hand flung across the rabbit she still slept with. Odessa's gaze softened. "She's been drawing in that book every day," she said. "Yesterday she sketched the fence post you fixed." Fletcher smiled faintly. "She's good with detail. She sees the world like it owes her nothing," Odessa said, "and still she keeps finding things to love." Outside, the wind shifted through the trees, brushing against the window like a whisper. Odessa closed the ledger and set it aside. "There's something I want to show you," she said, rising. He followed her out past the barn and into the trees, where the light slanted gold through the branches. She led him to a narrow path, part grown with yarrow and bluebells, until they came to a clearing tucked between 2 ridges. A pile of stones sat at the center, moss-covered and still. "My brother's buried here," she said. "He was 19. Fletcher removed his hat, holding it to his chest. "He carved that cedar cross himself," she murmured. "Didn't know it'd be for him." They stood silent for a long while, birds calling in the canopy above. "I come here when the world feels too loud," she said. "Tell him the things I can't say aloud anywhere else." Fletcher glanced at her. "You want me to wait back?" "No," she said. "I want you here." She knelt and brushed pine needles from the base of the cross, her fingers gentle. "I told him about you 2 days after you came. Said there was a man fixing roofs and reading my daughter's drawings like they mattered." Fletcher crouched beside her. "What'd he say?" "I think he'd have liked you," she said. "He never trusted charm. But he believed in quiet things." They stayed there until the sun dropped low, then made their way back without speaking. At the edge of the yard, Odessa paused. "I haven't let anyone into that part of my life before." "You didn't have to," Fletcher said. "You chose to." She looked at him, her face open in a way he hadn't yet seen. "I want you to know something, all right. I didn't dance in the rain because I was trying to forget anything," she said. "I did it because for the first time in years I didn't feel alone." He stepped closer, his voice low. "I didn't say those words because I was trying to fill silence. I said them because I've never meant anything more." Odessa reached for his hand, fingers warm and rough with work. "Then I reckon we're past beginning." "Yes," he said. "We are." and as the light faded to dusk, they stood in the yard they had begun to build together, cedar saplings behind them, the fence stretching wide, and something deep and unshakable settling between them like the long, steady hush of a summer evening. By midsummer, the air had thickened with bee-song and the low hum of heat settling into the soil. Fletcher had finished the corral, the cedar rails tight and square, and Odessa had begun setting aside jars for canning glass saved from years past, waxed paper ready to seal against dust and time. Odessa stood behind the house, stripping dried lavender from its stems. Her fingers worked slow, deliberate, while Calla played nearby with a crown of thistle flowers tucked behind one ear. Fletcher approached from the lower field, a small pouch in hand. "I found something," he said. Odessa brushed her hands clean. "Let's see." He opened the pouch and drew out a smooth, oval stone with a streak of pale quartz running through the center like a line of lightning. "From the creek bed," he said. "It reminded me of the way you stand when the wind's high." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Steady," he said, but still listening. She ran her thumb over the stone's surface, then handed it to Calla, who cradled it like something rare. "You giving it to her?" Odessa asked. "I'm giving it to both of you," Fletcher said. "You're not separate in my mind." Later that week, Odessa brought out her mother's spinning wheel from the storeroom. The wood was cracked near the hub and one of the treadle slats had warped, but the bones were strong. She set it beneath the window, and Fletcher spent 2 evenings reshaping the damaged slat with a drawknife, hands careful not to disturb the old joinery. "My mother used to spin in the evenings," she said as she tested the wheel. Said it kept her thoughts from wandering where they weren't needed. Fletcher leaned against the doorframe. "You think yours wander too far. They stay where they should now," she said. "They stay here." In the days that followed, the three of them began preparing for autumn. Fletcher cleared the brush behind the goat pen to make room for a second shelter, and Odessa taught Calla to thread a needle well enough to patch her own apron. The girl took to it with the determination of someone who knew her help mattered. One morning, Odessa returned from the garden with a small basket of early squash and found Fletcher sitting with Calla beneath the cottonwood. He was holding a spool of string, showing her how to knot it into a snare loop. Odessa stopped at the edge of the yard, watching them. Calla's brow was furrowed in concentration. Fletcher's voice was low, patient. That night, after Calla had fallen asleep with her rabbit tucked under her arm, Odessa stood on the porch and watched Fletcher light his pipe with a coal from the hearth. "I never thought I'd see her learn from a man without flinching," she said. "She's earned the right to learn safe," he said. Odessa stepped beside him, her voice quiet. "You've made this place more than it was." He looked out across the pasture. "You gave me the chance to." She turned to him, fingers curling against the porch rail. "I don't want you to feel like you owe us anything." "I don't," he said. "But I want to be here. I want to build this life with you." Odessa looked at him long, her face open, unguarded. "I want that too," she said. "I want you to stay, not just in the barn, not just for the season." Fletcher nodded. "Then I will." She drew closer, her hand finding his. He curled his fingers around hers, slow and certain. The next morning they rose early. Together, they walked the fence line and checked the goat shelter. Odessa showed Fletcher the spot near the south slope where the soil stayed warm into October. He marked it for garlic planting. They spoke of winter stores, of firewood, of building a root cellar. That evening, with the sun low and the air thick with the scent of pine, Fletcher knelt beside Calla where she sat sorting her drawings. "You've made this place feel like home," he said. The child looked up. "Are you my pa now?" Fletcher didn't answer right away. He looked toward Odessa, standing at the cabin door, watching him with a stillness that carried weight. "I'd like to be," he said. Calla nodded, satisfied. "Then you are." Odessa stepped down into the yard, her eyes soft. "You ready to marry me?" she asked. Fletcher rose slowly, brushing the dust from his knees. "Only if you'll have me." "I will," she said. They wed the following Sunday, with the creek quiet behind them and the cottonwood casting long shadows across the yard. Odessa wore her mother's brooch pinned to her collar. Fletcher wore his sister's locket tucked into his shirt. Calla stood between them, holding both their hands. They said no vows beyond what they meant, no promises beyond what would be lived. And when the sun dipped behind the ridge, they walked back to the cabin as three figures beneath the cedar saplings they had planted together, whose roots were already holding firm in the warming earth. Years passed, quiet and sure. The cedar trees grew tall, their trunks thick with time. The goats multiplied, the garden deepened. A second child came, a boy with Odessa's steadiness and Fletcher's watchful eyes. Calla taught him how to hold a hen without startling it. Each night they sat together beneath the same cottonwood, listening to the land settle into dusk. Odessa spun wool by lantern light. Fletcher carved handles for tools Calla would one day use. They never left the valley. They never needed to, and their love, like the land, held weathered and true, quiet but vast and always there.